So, okay. So yeah, interesting question. Who likes prospecting? And I had quite a few different responses. And one of the reasons I asked the question is because it's often about 50-50. And I did a session, I did a webinar a few weeks ago for the Institute of Sales Professionals, and I asked that exact question. And this was a group of people who are professional salespeople. And it was about 50-50. So about 50% said, no, I don't like prospecting. But interesting, some of the responses where you said, actually, I get all my business from referrals, which is a really great place to be. And it does also, matter whether or not, what is your prospecting route? Some people might be comfortable with cold calling, some people not. Cold calling might not be a route to prospecting in their business. It might be networking, referrals, word of mouth. And I think it was Kay who actually, I loved that, what she said about going out to the people. Who are the people that you know? Again, that's a great, asking for referrals and asking for contacts on customers and people that you know. So it's more for interest really, but I think we put the trend there because I think more people said they're quite comfortable with a form of prospecting than not. So more of you like prospecting or comfortable with it than a group of sales professionals. So interesting. Now I'm going to try and cover. So point one, my first caveat is there's no silver bullets in sales. What I'm going to try and cover in probably 8 minutes now is some key points around why buyers behave as they do and how sellers behave and why that impacts the way buyers behave. And a very quick run through of a sales best practice, 7 key steps, a standardized, consistent process of selling. Because any business should not have a group of salespeople who are doing their own thing. If a business has a sales team, they should be following a standardized sales process. I'm happy to take questions, but probably better to leave those to the end, if that's okay with everybody, but I'm very, very happy to take questions at the end. So typical seller order. Now, normally I would get people to shout out what they think is the typical seller order and buyer order. But in the interest of time, I'll walk through it. So firstly, what a lot of traditional typical salespeople do, they will do a needs analysis. Their qualification will be light touch. So it might be a case of, they've invited me here, they said they need a new whatever, they're qualified. When in fact, they've not really asked any questions. And the key to selling is asking lots of questions, understanding what is the buyer's need, what is their pain, and can I fix their pain? My usual story for that one is a guy, I needed a new porch years ago, Anglian came round, he showed me everything he had, and he was pressuring me, and he didn't actually ask me why I needed a new porch. And it got to the point where he wrote a price on the back of a A4 sheet of paper and said, can you afford this, £30 a week? Yeah, why aren't you buying? Well, because you haven't actually asked me what I need, why I need a new porch. I invited another company round who came and said, what do you want a new porch for? There's nothing wrong with this one. I said, well, it's wooden, and in the winter it swells and I can't get the door closed. He said, we don't need a new porch. You need an aluminium frame to stop them swelling. So a good comparison there between somebody who was just giving me loads of free consulting and pressuring me into buy versus somebody who asked questions to understand what my need was and created a solution to fix my need. People buy for their own reasons, not for the salesperson's reasons. So the presentation on the back of a very light touch needs analysis, qualification, and then they'll attempt to close. So in my porch salesman's case, A4 piece of paper, can you afford that? Yes. Well, why don't you buy it? Typically, we're not asking the right questions. We may be a bit pressurized. Prospects, potential buyers may be playing their cards close to their chest. Hard sell is only good for one thing, which is hard pushback. We won't have asked the right questions, so we won't have addressed all of their concerns. So we get into objection handling, where they'll raise lots of questions, lots of concerns. Might become a bit of a game of tennis, batting those to and fro. But if we ask the right questions at the outset, we wouldn't be having to handle those questions late on, because we would have agreed with the prospect that we both understand what their pain is or the gain that they're looking to achieve, and our solution clearly demonstrates that it can fix that pain or give the gain. They then go into follow-up mode. So they'll accept a wishy-washy, I'll think it over, I need to go and speak to my partner, I need to go and speak to the MD, I need to go and talk to the FD, I need to go and do something other than give you a firm decision. So they'll use wishy-washy language like, I need to go and think it over, I'll call you next week, or give me a call next week. And that's the one takeaway I would always say to people when you're out there talking to prospects. Don't accept to think it over. A think it over is just a slow no. What you're looking for is an outcome. You're looking for a yes or a no. It's a no either from you as the seller or them. I don't think that we're the right partner. Fine. A no is better than a TIO. Go for the no, because each time you go for no, you're going to save yourselves a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of energy than those salespeople who keep going, chasing those think it overs and those give me a call next week, where because they haven't been told a no, they've got what we call happy ears, and they think that the buyer is still interested when in fact they're not, they've gone. So a lot of salespeople or business owners who are having to sell for their own business, unless they've got a no, often spend a lot of time chasing those dead-end leads. So we get into that follow-up stage where they've said, give us a ring next Wednesday, so we're phoning, no reply, voicemail, no call back, send an email, no reply. And then we're a little bit anxious because, well, they said, give me a call. They said, give me a call. But I don't want to become that pest, because that's the perception of salespeople, is they're going to be a pest, they're going to chase you down, and they're going to pressurize you to sell. So we need to sound different. So one of the keys is, and one of the key Sandler principles is sounding different to that traditional salesperson. Because if we sound, smell, taste like that traditional salesperson, then as buyers, and we're all buyers, don't forget, probably in our personal lives and our business lives, our defenses are raised. We're on our guard against that typical perception of a salesperson who is going to control us and try and pressure us into buy something that we don't need or don't want. So that's a typical seller order. Now, a typical buyer order, and if we think about ourselves in a buying situation, firstly, we will express some interest, probably, but we won't. We may be a bit coy about that. We may well play our cards close to our chest in the early stages. We may avoid engaging with the salesperson. And my typical example here is, if you think about walking into a car showroom, usually in that big glass showroom, there's the salesperson stood there. And what happens? We walk in the door and we're asked that question, aren't we? Can I help you? What do we typically say? So if you walk into a car showroom or a showroom of any type or a business of any type where there's a salesperson stood and they approach you and they say, can I help you? Our typical response is, no, I'm just looking, thank you. And again, that's a reaction to, that's learned behavior as buyers because we want to retain control of that transaction. We want to make the decisions whether we want to speak to the salesperson, and we will speak to them when we are ready to, whenever that is, if that ever happens.
You've got 1 minute, Martin.
Oh, crikey. If we do decide to talk to them, we will act motivated. And our key to acting motivated is because we want to obtain information. And in the world of professional sales, professional procurement rather, professional procurement teams are trained to obtain information because they may be looking to reappoint the existing supplier. They might be going out to tender. They might want to benchmark the existing supplier on price, beat them up on value, and so on. Then, of course, we'll avoid commitment and we'll use wishy-washy words like, I'll think it over, ring me next week, and so on. But of course, then we disappear. So the salesperson only has lifetime free subscription to our voicemail. So that's what we call, can I go on for a couple more minutes? Is that okay? I can,
just two more, yeah, because we're going to run out of time otherwise.
Yeah,
So thank
okay.
you.
So that's what we call the buyer-seller dance, where the buyer actually has control and the seller has no control, which is why the seller is being led. They're being led a dance. If we think about a dance, at the partnership, one partner has control. They decide when the dance starts, stops, where it goes on the dance floor, and the tempo. So just very quickly, we have 7 steps, and if you follow these steps and you do the qualification well at the early stage, you will save yourself a lot of time and energy. So the first part is the bonding and rapport, where we build a relationship. Now, whether or not that's getting a conversation from a cold call, if you make cold calls, whether or not that's in networking, whether or not that's connecting with people on LinkedIn, on social media, it's how do we do that? How do we stop those defense mechanisms going up in the buyer? We then have an upfront contract where we set out the tone of the relationship, because we want equal business stature. We don't want to play the role of that subservient salesperson who's sent off to get loads and loads of quotes time after time after time, and then the buyer disappears. So how do we do that? We set out the relationship on an equal footing. Qualification stage, we need to understand if they have pain. No, no sale. So if we can't find pain, if we can't fix their pain, we should disqualify it, because there's no point in trying to sell something that is no good to them. We're better off going off and selling our products or services to somebody who we really can help. Budget isn't just about money, it's also about time and resources. Depending on what your business is, it may be that if you bring on board a new client, my background for many, many years was car leasing and fleet management. It was a 6-month implementation once we won a new client. So we had to be crystal clear with the client that if they come on board, do they have the resources their side to implement, ready and waiting to implement the fleet management solution. Often you get to the end of a sale and they want to come on board, and then they realize that they can't actually project manage it. So we need to be clear about time, money, and resources in the budget. Decision isn't just a decision, it's a decision-making process. Are we talking to the right person? Are they the decision maker? How do we find out what their decision-making process is? How do they make decisions in buying situations? Do we need to bring other people into the conversation from their side? So we need to be able to ask the right questions in the right way to establish that. Fulfillment. So if we've built a good relationship, the relationship is on a good equal footing. We've found pain, we can fix it. There is budget, time, money, resources, and we understand and can work with their decision-making process. We should be in a position to close the sale. We might need to present, but the whole closing should not be relying on that presentation. We might need to present because that's the buyer's procurement policy, but we should have agreed with the buyer at every step that we are able to fix their pain, they have the budget, and we understand the decision-making process. Now, it might be in a tender situation, we might not be able to get a yes or a no at the end of that presentation because their policy says we need to interview or we need to have 2 or 3 or 4 prospective suppliers present. But at least we know when we're going into that with the knowledge of we may not be able to get a yes or no at the end of the presentation, but we know that that is the situation. We also talk about how to prevent buyer's remorse and how to deal with incumbent suppliers that if they're dislodged, they will come back with a better commercial offer. So it's really important to cover off those topics head on with the prospect and validate their level of commitment to coming with us in those circumstances. And then, of course, post-sell, which is how do we work more with that client once we've got working with them, once we've delivered, we've built credibility, we've demonstrated that we can deliver, and we have a strong relationship. How do we work with them on a broader basis through upselling and cross-selling? So
Martin, that's 14 minutes. Have you got one final point? Thank you.
That's it. I'm there. So I'm very happy to answer any questions. I was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but I'm very happy to, if anyone wants to take a screenshot and get in touch, if you want to have a one-to-one, happy to do that. I appreciate that was quite a whistle-stop tour. I'm a little bit out of breath now, but yeah, hopefully there's some key points there that came across. So sorry for being 4 minutes over. If I'd made my upfront contract, which said 10 minutes, I've broken my own contract there.